Elena Martinez had always believed that love would conquer everything. She married David Richardson when she was 22, full of dreams about building a family together in their small town of Millbrook. David was the son of a wealthy businessman, and everyone expected their marriage to produce heirs to continue the family legacy. Elena shared these expectations, imagining herself as a mother surrounded by laughing children. For the first 2 years of marriage, Elena and David lived in blissful happiness. They traveled together, built their dream home on the outskirts of town, and spent countless evenings planning their future. David would often talk about teaching his sons to play baseball and taking his daughters to dance recitals. Elena would smile and add her own dreams to their conversations, describing family holidays and birthday celebrations. Everything changed when Elena failed to conceive after their second year of marriage. At first, David remained supportive, suggesting they see a doctor together. Dr. Sarah Williams, the town's fertility specialist, ran extensive tests on both of them. The results were devastating for Elena. Dr. Williams explained that Elena had a rare condition that made natural conception nearly impossible. David's tests came back completely normal. The news hit Elena like a physical blow. She spent days crying in their bedroom while David tried to comfort her. He assured her that they would explore other options, that there were treatments and alternatives. Elena clung to his words, believing that their love was strong enough to weather this storm. As months passed, David's attitude began to shift. His mother, Margaret Richardson, made increasingly frequent visits to their home. Elena would overhear hushed conversations between David and his mother about the family line and disappointing expectations. Margaret never spoke directly to Elena about the fertility issues, but her cold stares and sharp comments about other women's pregnancies made her feelings clear. David started working longer hours and coming home later each evening. When Elena tried to discuss adoption or fertility treatments, he would change the subject or claim he was too tired to talk. Their intimate moments became rare and mechanical. Elena felt herself becoming invisible in her own home. The breaking point came during a family gathering at the Richardson estate. David's cousin announced her pregnancy, and the entire family erupted in celebration. Elena watched from the corner as Margaret Richardson embraced the pregnant woman, tears of joy streaming down her face. The older woman's eyes met Elena's across the room, and the message was clear: this is what a real woman provides for this family. That night, David and Elena had their worst fight yet. He accused her of being selfish for not pursuing aggressive fertility treatments. Elena reminded him that they had discussed the treatments and decided together that the success rates were too low and the process too invasive. David's response shocked her to her core. "Maybe we made the wrong decision about more than just the treatments," he said coldly. "Maybe we made the wrong decision about everything." Elena felt her world crumble around her. The man she had loved and trusted was looking at her like she was a stranger, like she was a problem to be solved rather than a wife to be cherished. She tried to salvage their conversation, to remind him of their vows and their love, but David had already emotionally checked out of their marriage. The final blow came 2 weeks later. Elena returned home from grocery shopping to find David sitting at their kitchen table with divorce papers spread in front of him. His lawyer, James Mitchell, sat beside him with an apologetic expression. "Elena," David said without looking up, "we need to discuss the terms of our separation." Elena dropped her grocery bags, apples rolling across the floor. "Separation? David, what are you talking about? We haven't even tried counseling yet." David finally met her eyes, and Elena saw a stranger looking back at her. "I've thought about this extensively, Elena. We want different things now. I need a wife who can give me children. You can't. It's that simple." The words hit Elena like physical blows. She sank into a chair across from him, her hands shaking. "David, please. We can adopt. We can try other options. We don't have to throw away 6 years together." "I don't want to adopt," David said firmly. "I want my own children. My biological children. The Richardson name needs to continue through blood, not legal papers." Elena stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time how their fertility struggles had revealed David's true character. The man she had married would never have spoken about children like property or treated her like a failed investment. This man sitting across from her was someone she didn't recognize. James Mitchell cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Richardson, these papers are quite generous. Mr. Richardson is offering you the cottage downtown, a substantial monthly allowance, and your car. You would need to vacate this property within 30 days. Elena looked around the kitchen where she had prepared thousands of meals, where she had planned birthday parties for nieces and nephews, where she had dreamed of feeding her own children breakfast before school. Everything she had built was being stripped away because her body had failed to perform its expected function. "I need time to think," Elena whispered. "You have until tomorrow," David replied. "I've already moved my things to my mother's house. I'll be staying there until the divorce is finalized." That night, Elena sat alone in their bedroom, staring at her wedding photos. The smiling couple in those pictures seemed like fictional characters from someone else's story. She thought about calling her sister Maria in San Francisco, but she couldn't bear to admit that her perfect marriage had been built on such shallow foundations. Elena spent the next few days wandering through the house like a ghost, touching objects and remembering happier times. She packed her belongings mechanically, each item a reminder of dreams that would never be fulfilled. The hardest items to pack were the baby clothes she had secretly purchased, tiny outfits hidden in the back of her closet that represented hope she could no longer afford to carry. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. David's family had money and influence in Millbrook, and Elena lacked the resources to fight their well-funded legal team. Margaret Richardson made sure that word of Elena's failure as a wife spread through their social circle. Former friends avoided her at the grocery store. Her neighbor, Patricia Wong, was the only person who continued to treat her with kindness. "This isn't your fault," Patricia told her one afternoon as they shared coffee in Elena's soon-to-be former kitchen. "A man who abandons his wife during her darkest hour isn't a man worth keeping." Elena appreciated Patricia's support, but the shame and rejection had settled deep into her bones. She felt defective, unwomanly, cast aside like a broken appliance that no longer served its purpose. On her last day in the house, Elena stood in the empty nursery they had optimistically prepared during their first year of marriage. The pale yellow walls and carefully chosen furniture mocked her now. She had painted those walls herself, choosing a gender-neutral color because she and David wanted to be surprised. The irony wasn't lost on her that the room had remained empty, just like her womb. David came by to collect his remaining belongings while Elena was loading her final boxes into her car. They barely spoke, but she caught him looking at her with something that might have been regret. For a moment, Elena thought he might apologize or try to reconcile. Instead, he handed her the house key and walked away without a backward glance. Elena drove to her new cottage with tears streaming down her face. The small house felt like a consolation prize, a reminder of everything she had lost. She spent her first night there sitting on the floor of her empty living room, surrounded by boxes and broken dreams. The cottage was located on the edge of Millbrook's historic district, surrounded by ancient oak trees that blocked most of the sunlight. Elena's nearest neighbors were an elderly couple, the Johnsons, who kept to themselves. The isolation suited Elena's wounded spirit, but it also deepened her sense of abandonment. During her first week in the cottage, Elena's sister Maria called from San Francisco. Elena had been avoiding her calls, but Maria was persistent. "Elena, what's going on? I've been trying to reach you for days." David's mother posted on social media about him being newly single and ready to find the right woman. "What happened to your marriage?" Elena broke down and told Maria everything. Her sister listened without judgment, offering comfort and outrage in equal measure. "Come to San Francisco," Maria urged. "Stay with me and Roberto. You can start fresh here, away from all those toxic people." Elena considered the offer but ultimately declined. Despite everything that had happened, Millbrook was still her home. She had grown up there, had roots and memories that predated David Richardson. Running away felt like admitting defeat. Instead, Elena decided to rebuild her life in Millbrook on her own terms. She found a job at the local library, working with children's programs. The irony of being surrounded by children when she couldn't have her own wasn't lost on her, but she found unexpected joy in reading stories and organizing craft activities. Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, became a motherly figure to Elena. She never asked invasive questions about the divorce but offered steady support and friendship. Elena began to find purpose in her work, creating programs that brought families together and fostered a love of learning in young minds. Evenings were the hardest time for Elena. The cottage felt too quiet, too empty. She started taking long walks through Millbrook's historic district, admiring the Victorian houses and imagining the lives of the families inside them. During one of these walks, she discovered an antique shop called Midnight Treasures that she had never noticed before. The shop was tucked between two larger buildings, its dark windows and ornate door giving it a mysterious appearance. Elena was drawn to the beautiful vintage jewelry displayed in the window. She pressed her face against the glass, admiring an intricate silver necklace with what appeared to be genuine emeralds. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. Elena turned to see a tall man with striking features and the most unusual pale blue eyes she had ever encountered. He was dressed impeccably in a dark suit that seemed expensive but old-fashioned in style. Something about his presence made Elena's heart race, though she couldn't identify why. "I'm sorry," Elena said, suddenly self-conscious. "I was just admiring the jewelry. I don't usually window shop, but that necklace is extraordinary." The man smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. "I'm Alexander Blackwood, the owner of Midnight Treasures. That particular piece has been waiting for the right person to appreciate it. Perhaps you would like to come inside and see it properly?" Elena hesitated. Something about Alexander was both compelling and slightly unsettling. He seemed too polished, too perfect, like a character from a period film who had somehow stepped into modern-day Millbrook. "I should probably head home," Elena said. "Thank you for the offer, though." "Of course," Alexander replied graciously. "But, please, take this." He handed her an elegant business card with gold lettering. "If you ever find yourself curious about the stories behind beautiful things, Midnight Treasures specializes in items with rich histories." Elena accepted the card, her fingers tingling slightly when they brushed against Alexander's. She hurried home, unsettled by the intensity of her reaction to a complete stranger. That night, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Alexander Blackwood and his mysterious shop. She found herself holding his business card, tracing the elegant lettering with her finger. Something about him had awakened feelings she thought David's betrayal had killed forever. Over the following weeks, Elena found herself walking past Midnight Treasures more frequently. Sometimes she glimpsed Alexander through the windows, moving gracefully among his antiques with an otherworldly elegance. He never pressured her to enter, but he would nod politely when their eyes met through the glass. Elena's life in the cottage began to develop a routine. She worked at the library during the day, enjoying her interactions with children and their families. In the evenings, she would cook simple meals and read books, trying to rediscover interests that had been overshadowed by her marriage to David. The healing process was slow and painful. Some days, Elena felt strong and optimistic about her future. Other days, the rejection and shame overwhelmed her, making it difficult to leave her bed. She started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Goldman, who helped her understand that David's abandonment reflected his character flaws, not her worth as a woman. 3 months after her divorce was finalized, Elena received shocking news from Patricia Wong. David had not only started dating immediately after their separation, but he was now engaged to a woman named Jessica Hamilton, the daughter of another wealthy Millbrook family. "The wedding is planned for next month," Patricia told Elena gently. "I thought you should hear it from a friend rather than see it in the local paper." Elena felt like she had been punched in the stomach. The speed of David's engagement confirmed what she had suspected: he had been emotionally unfaithful long before their divorce. Jessica was everything Elena was not: young, from the right family, and presumably fertile. That evening, Elena walked past Midnight Treasures in a daze. She stood outside the shop, tears streaming down her face as she processed the finality of David's betrayal. The door opened behind her. "Elena," Alexander's voice was gentle and concerned. "Are you all right?" She turned to face him, not caring that her makeup was ruined or that she looked devastated. "I'm sorry. I'm having a difficult day. I should go home." "Nonsense," Alexander said firmly. "Come inside." let me make you some tea. For reasons she couldn't explain, Elena followed Alexander into Midnight Treasures. The interior of the shop was even more intriguing than she had imagined. Antiques from different eras filled every available space, each piece seeming to tell its own story. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, lit by soft lamplight that made everything glow mysteriously. Alexander guided Elena to a comfortable chair and disappeared into a back room. She looked around at the incredible collection surrounding her. There were ornate mirrors, vintage clothing, ancient books, and jewelry that seemed to sparkle with their own inner light. Alexander returned with an elegant tea service and 2 delicate porcelain cups. He poured the tea with practiced grace, and Elena noticed that his hands were unusually pale and cold-looking. "This is a special blend," Alexander said, offering her a cup. "It's particularly soothing during times of emotional distress." Elena accepted the tea gratefully. The first sip sent warmth spreading through her body, along with an unexpected sense of calm. "Thank you. I'm sorry to impose on you like this. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Alexander replied, settling into the chair across from her. "I know that you're kind, because I've watched you help elderly customers at the library. I know that you're strong, because you've survived something that would have broken a weaker person. And I know that you're beautiful inside and out, despite what others may have made you believe." Elena stared at him in shock. No one had spoken to her with such genuine warmth and appreciation since her marriage had begun to crumble. "How do you know about my situation?" Alexander smiled sadly. "Millbrook is a small town, Elena. Word travels, especially when it involves the Richardson family. What happened to you was cruel and unfair." Elena felt tears welling up again. "David says I failed as a wife. His mother agrees. Maybe they're right." "They are profoundly wrong," Alexander said with quiet intensity. "A woman's worth is not determined by her fertility. You are valuable because of who you are, not what your body can or cannot do." The conviction in Alexander's voice touched something deep inside Elena's wounded heart. For the first time in months, she felt seen and appreciated as a complete person rather than a collection of broken parts. They talked for hours that evening. Alexander shared stories about his antiques and their previous owners, painting vivid pictures of love, loss, and redemption throughout history. Elena found herself opening up about her dreams and fears, sharing thoughts she had never expressed even to David during their marriage. When Elena finally left Midnight Treasures that night, she felt lighter than she had in months. Alexander walked her to the door, placing his coat around her shoulders when he noticed her shivering. "Keep it for now," he said when she tried to return it. "The nights are growing colder." Elena walked home wrapped in Alexander's coat, breathing in its subtle scent of cedar and something indefinably masculine. For the first time since her divorce, she fell asleep without crying. The next morning, Elena woke with a strange energy coursing through her body. She felt more alive and vibrant than she had in years. When she looked in the mirror, her skin seemed to glow and her eyes appeared brighter. She attributed the change to finally having a good night's sleep. Elena returned Alexander's coat that afternoon, finding an excuse to visit Midnight Treasures during her lunch break. Alexander greeted her warmly, and they fell into easy conversation about a new shipment of Victorian jewelry he had acquired. As the days passed, Elena found herself drawn to Midnight Treasures and to Alexander himself. There was something mysterious about him that she couldn't quite identify. He never seemed to eat or drink anything other than that special tea. His skin was always cool to the touch, and she never saw him during daylight hours, only in the evenings when the shop's warm lighting created an intimate atmosphere. Alexander was unlike any man Elena had ever known. He listened to her with complete attention, remembered every detail she shared, and spoke to her as if her thoughts and opinions mattered deeply. After years of feeling invisible in her marriage, Alexander's focused attention was intoxicating. One evening, as Elena was preparing to leave Midnight Treasures, Alexander presented her with the emerald necklace she had admired in his window. "I can't accept this," Elena protested. "It must be incredibly valuable." "Its value means nothing if it sits in a display case," Alexander replied. "Beautiful things should be worn by beautiful women. Please, allow me this small gesture." Elena allowed Alexander to fasten the necklace around her throat. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. When she looked in the antique mirror he held up for her, she barely recognized herself. The emeralds brought out the green flecks in her brown eyes, and the intricate silver setting complemented her dark hair perfectly. "You look like a queen," Alexander whispered, his breath cool against her ear. Elena met his gaze in the mirror and saw something ancient and powerful in his pale blue eyes. For a moment, she felt afraid, but the fear was mixed with an excitement she couldn't deny. That night, Elena dreamed of Alexander. In her dreams, he was not just the owner of an antique shop but something far more mysterious and dangerous. She woke with her heart pounding and the strange sensation that her dreams contained more truth than fantasy. Elena's transformation over the following weeks was remarkable. Her confidence returned, her laughter became genuine again, and she began to see herself as worthy of love and desire. Alexander's attention had awakened parts of herself that David had never appreciated or even noticed. The people of Millbrook began to notice Elena's change as well. Mrs. Henderson commented on her renewed energy at work. Patricia Wong mentioned that Elena seemed to glow with health and happiness. Even strangers on the street seemed drawn to her newfound radiance. Elena was slowly healing from the wounds David had inflicted, but she sensed that her story was far from over. Alexander Blackwood had brought mystery and magic back into her life, but she was beginning to suspect that he was harboring secrets that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, power, and her own destiny. As autumn deepened in Millbrook, Elena stood at the threshold of a new chapter in her life. She had survived David's betrayal and was discovering her own strength and worth. What she didn't know was that her meeting with Alexander Blackwood was not the coincidence it seemed, and that her future held possibilities she could never have imagined in her wildest dreams. Elena's relationship with Alexander deepened as winter approached Millbrook. She found herself spending most of her evenings at Midnight Treasures, drawn not only to Alexander himself but to the sense of belonging she felt in his presence. The antique shop had become a sanctuary where she could escape the judgment and whispers that still followed her around town. One particularly cold December evening, Elena arrived at the shop to find Alexander arranging a display of ancient books. His movements were fluid and precise, almost hypnotic to watch. When he looked up and saw her, his entire face transformed with genuine joy. "Elena," he said, moving toward her with that graceful stride she had come to love. "I've been waiting for you." "You say that every evening," Elena laughed, unwrapping her scarf. "Anyone would think you had nothing better to do than wait for a divorced librarian to visit your shop." Alexander's expression grew serious. "Perhaps because that's exactly what I do." Something in his tone made Elena pause. Over the past few months, she had noticed strange things about Alexander that she had chosen to ignore. He never seemed to age, even though she had been visiting his shop for months. His skin was always cold, regardless of the weather. She had never seen him eat food or drink anything other than that mysterious tea. Most puzzling of all, she had never encountered him during daylight hours, despite the shop's posted business hours. "Alexander," Elena said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." He set down the book he was holding and gave her his full attention. "Ask me anything. What are you?" The question sounded absurd even as Elena spoke it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Alexander was not entirely human. Alexander was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Elena saw conflict in his pale blue eyes, as if he was weighing a decision that would change everything between them. "Come with me," he said finally, taking her hand and leading her toward the back of the shop. Elena had never been beyond the main showroom of Midnight Treasures. Alexander led her through a door she had assumed was a storage closet, but instead found herself in an elegant living space that seemed to exist outside of normal time and space. The rooms were decorated with antiques that looked genuinely ancient, not reproductions but actual artifacts from centuries past. "This is where I live," Alexander said, watching Elena's reaction carefully. Elena wandered through the space in amazement. The furniture was exquisite, clearly crafted by master artisans from different historical periods. Paintings on the walls depicted scenes from across the centuries, and Elena noticed that several of them featured a man who looked remarkably like Alexander. These paintings, Elena said, stopping in front of a portrait dated 1847. This man looks exactly like you. That's because it is me, Alexander said quietly. Elena turned to stare at him. That's impossible. This painting is nearly 200 years old. Alexander moved to stand beside her, his reflection notably absent from the ornate mirror hanging nearby. Elena's breath caught in her throat as the impossible truth began to dawn on her. You're a vampire, she whispered. Alexander nodded slowly. I am. I was turned in 1823 by a vampire named Lucian Drackle, who thought I would make a useful addition to his court. I have lived for over 2 centuries, Elena. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched countless mortals live and die, and never once in all that time have I felt what I feel when I'm with you. Elena's mind reeled as she processed this revelation. Every strange detail about Alexander suddenly made perfect sense. His cold skin, his nocturnal habits, his ageless appearance, the way he seemed to understand historical periods with the intimacy of someone who had lived through them. Are you afraid of me? Alexander asked, his voice careful and controlled. Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath his supernatural confidence. I should be, she admitted. But I'm not. I felt more alive these past few months than I did during my entire marriage to David. If being with you means accepting what you are, then I accept it. Relief flooded Alexander's features. He reached for Elena, pulling her into his arms with gentle intensity. You don't know what you're saying, Elena. My world is dangerous. There are things about vampire society that you cannot begin to imagine. Then, tell me, Elena said firmly. Help me understand. Alexander led her to a comfortable sofa and began to explain the hidden world that existed alongside the human realm. He told her about vampire courts and ancient hierarchies, about territorial disputes and political alliances that span continents. He explained how vampires fed and how they maintained their secrecy from human society. There are rules that govern our kind, Alexander said. Laws that have existed for millennia. Vampires who break these laws face severe consequences, including final death. What kind of laws? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew where this conversation was heading. The most important law forbids vampires from forming romantic attachments to humans, Alexander said heavily. Such relationships are seen as weaknesses that compromise a vampire's judgment and loyalty to their kind. Elena felt her heart sink. So what we have between us, it's forbidden. Completely, Alexander confirmed. If the vampire court discovered our relationship, we would both face punishment. You would likely be killed, and I would face a fate far worse than death. Despite the danger, Elena felt no desire to end their relationship. If anything, learning Alexander's true nature had deepened her feelings for him. He had chosen to trust her with his most dangerous secret, and she understood the magnitude of that gesture. There's something else you need to know, Alexander continued. I am not just any vampire. My maker, Lucian Drackle, was one of the most powerful vampires in existence. When he was destroyed 50 years ago, his territories and responsibilities fell to me. I am, in effect, a vampire king, ruling over 5 different vampire courts across North America. Elena stared at him in shock. Your vampire royalty? I rule over thousands of vampires, Alexander confirmed. My decisions affect the lives and deaths of countless supernatural beings. It's a responsibility I never wanted but could not refuse. The revelation changed everything Elena thought she knew about Alexander. She had fallen in love with what she believed was a mysterious antique dealer, only to discover that he was one of the most powerful supernatural beings on the continent. Why are you telling me all of this? Elena asked. Alexander took her hands in his cold ones. Because I love you, Elena Martinez. I have loved you since the first moment I saw you standing outside my shop, broken but not defeated. I want to offer you something that no human has ever been offered before. Elena's heart pounded as she waited for him to continue. I want to make you my queen, Alexander said. Not just my companion or my lover, but my equal. My partner in ruling the vampire courts. I want to give you immortality, power, and a place by my side that no one can ever take away from you. Elena felt as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. 3 months ago, she had been discarded by her husband for her inability to bear children. Now, she was being offered the chance to become an immortal queen, ruling alongside the most powerful vampire in North America. What would that mean? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. It would mean transformation, Alexander explained. You would become a vampire, gaining immortality and powers beyond human imagination. You would never age, never die of disease or injury. But, you would also leave your human life behind forever. You could never return to your old existence. Elena thought about her current life in Millbrook. Her job at the library, her cottage, her few remaining human connections. Compared to what Alexander was offering, it all seemed so small and temporary. There's more, Alexander continued. As my queen, you would become a mother to 5 vampire children who desperately need guidance and stability. They are young vampires I created during times of great crisis, each of them powerful but struggling to find their place in our world. Elena's breath caught. After being rejected for her inability to have children, Alexander was offering her the chance to become a mother to 5 supernatural beings who needed her love and guidance. Where are they? Elena asked. Alexander smiled. They live in my real home, a castle in the mountains of British Columbia. It's been my primary residence for over a century, but I've been traveling extensively these past few years, managing the courts and searching for something I couldn't name. Now I know I was searching for you. Elena's mind raced with questions and possibilities. The life Alexander was describing seemed like a fantasy, too incredible to be real. Yet as she looked around his hidden living space, filled with genuine artifacts from centuries of existence, she knew he was telling the truth. Can I meet them? Elena asked. Your children, I mean. Alexander's face lit up. They're here, actually. They've been staying in the apartments above the neighboring buildings while I conducted my business in Millbrook. I wanted them nearby in case of danger, but I needed space to court you properly. Elena felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. They're here? Now. Would you like to meet them? Alexander asked. I should warn you, they can be somewhat protective of me. They've never seen me show interest in a human before. Elena straightened her shoulders, drawing on the confidence she had rebuilt over the past few months. If I'm going to be their mother, I suppose I should meet my children. Alexander squeezed her hands. Are you saying yes? To all of it? Elena looked into his ancient eyes and saw centuries of loneliness and responsibility. She thought about David, who had rejected her for something beyond her control. Then, she thought about Alexander, who was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. Yes, Elena said firmly. I want to be your queen. Alexander's joy was infectious. He pulled Elena into a passionate kiss, and she felt power coursing through her body just from his touch. When they broke apart, Elena felt different, as if some fundamental change had already begun. There is one thing, Alexander said carefully. The transformation process is intense and irreversible. Once you begin, there is no going back to your human life. Are you absolutely certain? Elena thought about her empty cottage, her painful memories of David's betrayal, and the whispers that still followed her around Millbrook. Then, she thought about the possibility of eternal love, supernatural power, and a family who would value her for who she was rather than what her body could produce. I'm certain, Elena said without hesitation. Alexander nodded and led her to another room where 5 figures waited in elegant chairs arranged in a semicircle. Elena's first impression was of otherworldly beauty and barely contained power. Each of the vampires before her was stunning in their own way, but she could sense the supernatural energy radiating from all of them. Elena, Alexander said formally, allow me to introduce my children. This is Victoria, turned in 1901 during the San Francisco earthquake. He gestured to a beautiful woman with auburn hair and intelligent green eyes who appeared to be in her mid-20s. Marcus, turned in 1943 when he was dying in a German prison camp. A handsome man with dark hair and intense brown eyes nodded respectfully to Elena. Isabella turned in 1867 after she was attacked by a rogue vampire in New Orleans. A petite woman with golden curls and bright blue eyes smiled warmly at Elena. Gabriel turned in 1979 when he was murdered by a rival gang in Detroit. A tall, imposing figure with silver-streaked hair and piercing gray eyes studied Elena with obvious curiosity. And Sophia, my youngest, turned just 3 years ago when she was dying of cancer at age 19. A young woman with long black hair and dark eyes that seemed far too old for her apparent age stepped forward. Elena felt overwhelmed by the weight of their combined attention. These were not ordinary people but powerful supernatural beings who had lived through decades or centuries of existence. The thought that she was being offered the chance to become their mother figure was both thrilling and terrifying. "Father has told us much about you," Victoria said, her voice carrying a slight accent from her original time period. "We are curious to meet the woman who has captured his heart so completely." "He speaks of you constantly," Marcus added with a slight smile. "It's been quite refreshing to see him happy after so many years of loneliness." Elena looked at Alexander, seeing him through new eyes. These vampires loved and respected him not just as their maker but as a father figure who had saved them from death or worse fates. The responsibility he carried was enormous, and Elena began to understand why he had seemed so burdened when she first met him. "Thank you for welcoming me," Elena said, finding her voice. "Alexander has told me that you need guidance and stability. I want you to know that I don't take the possibility of becoming your mother lightly." Sophia stepped closer, studying Elena with ancient eyes in a young face. "You smell different from other humans," she observed. "There's something special about you." Alexander moved protectively closer to Elena. "Sophia, remember your manners." "It's all right," Elena said, surprising herself with her composure. "I imagine you can sense things about people that I can't understand yet." Isabella laughed, a sound like silver bells. "She's perfect, Father." "When do we begin the transformation?" Elena felt a moment of panic. Everything was moving so quickly, and she wasn't sure she was ready for such a momentous change. Alexander seemed to sense her hesitation. "The transformation doesn't have to happen immediately," he said gently. "There are preparations to make, and Elena needs time to fully understand what she's accepting." Gabriel stepped forward, his expression serious. "With respect, Father, delaying the transformation could be dangerous. If the other courts discover Elena's existence before she's protected by vampire status, they might see her as a weakness to exploit." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Victoria answered, her voice grave. "There are vampire courts that oppose Alexander's rule. They believe he's too compassionate, too willing to coexist peacefully with humans. If they learned that he was romantically involved with a mortal woman, they might try to use you against him." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Which is why we've been careful to keep our relationship secret." "But Gabriel is right. The longer Elena remains human, the greater the risk to both of us." Elena looked around at the 6 vampires surrounding her, each one beautiful, powerful, and devoted to protecting their family unit. The life they were offering her was beyond anything she had ever imagined, but it came with dangers she was only beginning to understand. "What would the transformation involve?" Elena asked. Alexander exchanged glances with his children before answering. "It's a process that takes 3 days and nights. You would need to drink my blood while I drain yours, creating a bond between us that would make you immortal. During those 3 days, your body would undergo fundamental changes. Your senses would become enhanced, your strength would increase dramatically, and you would develop abilities that humans don't possess." "And after the transformation?" "You would be my queen in every sense," Alexander said. "You would share my power over the vampire courts, help me make decisions that affect thousands of supernatural beings, and become an immortal mother to these 5 remarkable individuals." Elena looked at each of Alexander's children again, seeing the hope and uncertainty in their ancient eyes. They wanted a mother figure, someone to provide the emotional stability that Alexander, despite his love and protection, couldn't fully give them as their maker and king. "There's something else you should know," Sophia said quietly. "As Father's queen, you would have the power to create new vampires yourself." You could build a family far larger than you ever imagined. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. David had discarded her because she couldn't give him biological children. Now she was being offered the chance to create an immortal family, to become a mother to powerful beings who would love and respect her for eternity. Elena took a deep breath and looked directly at Alexander. When would we do this? Alexander's relief was evident. Are you certain? There's no going back once we begin. Elena thought about her human life one more time. Her cottage, her job, the few friends she had left in Millbrook. None of it compared to the love and acceptance she felt in this room with these extraordinary beings. I'm certain, Elena said firmly. I want to become your queen. The joy that erupted from Alexander's children was infectious. Victoria clapped her hands together, Marcus smiled broadly, Isabella bounced excitedly, Gabriel nodded approvingly, and Sophia's ancient eyes filled with something that might have been tears. Tomorrow night, Alexander said, pulling Elena into his arms. We'll begin tomorrow night, after you've had time to make your final preparations. Elena spent the rest of the evening learning more about vampire society and the responsibility she would inherit as Alexander's queen. His children shared stories of their transformations and their centuries of existence, painting a picture of a world filled with beauty, danger, and endless possibilities. As dawn approached, Elena returned to her cottage for what would be her last day as a human being. She looked around the small space where she had rebuilt her life after David's betrayal, feeling grateful for the healing that had taken place there but ready to leave it behind forever. Elena spent her final human day writing letters to the few people who had shown her kindness during her darkest period. She wrote to her sister Maria, explaining that she was leaving Millbrook to start a new life but couldn't provide details about where she was going. She wrote to Mrs. Henderson at the library, thanking her for her support and friendship. She wrote to Patricia Wong, expressing gratitude for her neighborly kindness. She didn't write to David. He had forfeited any claim to know about her future when he abandoned her for her supposed failures. Elena felt no bitterness as she thought about her ex-husband, only pity for a man who was too shallow to recognize love when it was offered freely. As evening approached, Elena put on her most beautiful dress and the emerald necklace Alexander had given her. She looked at herself in the mirror, trying to memorize her human appearance before it changed forever. When she arrived at Midnight Treasures for the last time as a mortal woman, Alexander and his children were waiting for her in ceremonial clothing that seemed to come from different historical periods. Alexander wore an elaborate black coat that looked like it belonged in a royal court, while his children were dressed in elegant formal wear that matched their original time periods. You look beautiful, Alexander said, taking Elena's hands in his. Are you ready to become my queen? Elena looked around at the 5 vampires who were about to become her children, seeing love and acceptance in their ancient eyes. She thought about the empty life she was leaving behind and the incredible future stretching before her. I'm ready, Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As Alexander led her toward the room where her transformation would take place, Elena felt no fear, only anticipation. She was about to become something more than human, to join a family that valued her for who she was rather than what she could produce. After being discarded for her supposed failings, she was about to become the most powerful woman in the supernatural world. The greatest irony of all was that David Richardson, in his cruel rejection, had set in motion the events that would lead Elena to her true destiny. His inability to see her worth had freed her to discover her real value in the arms of an immortal king who would love her for eternity. The transformation began at midnight on the winter solstice, in a chamber beneath Midnight Treasures that Elena had never known existed. Alexander had explained that the timing was significant, that the longest night of the year would give her newly forming vampire nature the maximum time to establish itself before facing daylight. The chamber itself was ancient, carved from stone and lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Symbols from various cultures and time periods were etched into the stone, creating a sacred space that felt removed from the modern world above. Elena lay on an ornate altar covered in black silk, wearing a simple white dress that Alexander had chosen for its symbolic significance. His 5 children stood in a circle around the altar, each holding a candle and wearing expressions of solemn anticipation. Remember, Alexander said softly, his cold hand stroking Elena's hair, the process will be painful at first, but I will be with you every moment. Trust in the bond between us, and let yourself surrender to the change. Elena nodded, her human heart beating rapidly with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had never been more certain of anything in her life, yet the magnitude of what was about to happen was almost overwhelming. Alexander's bite, when it came, was nothing like Elena had expected. Instead of pain, she felt a rush of pleasure that spread through her entire body like warm honey. As her human blood flowed into Alexander, she felt their minds connecting in a way that transcended physical sensation. Through their growing bond, Elena experienced flashes of Alexander's long life. She saw him as a young man in 1823, dying of consumption before Lucian Drackle offered him immortality. She witnessed his centuries of loneliness, his reluctant assumption of power, and his desperate search for meaning in an existence that seemed endless and empty. When Alexander offered Elena his wrist, she bit down instinctively, his vampire blood burning like liquid fire as it entered her system. The taste was unlike anything human, rich and complex with undertones of power and eternity. With each swallow, Elena felt her humanity slipping away, replaced by something far stronger and more magnificent. The first night was the most intense. Elena's body underwent fundamental changes as her human organs and systems adapted to their new vampire nature. Her senses became incredibly acute, allowing her to hear conversations happening blocks away and smell the individual scents of every person in Millbrook. Her vision sharpened to the point where she could see clearly in complete darkness. Alexander never left her side during the transformation, holding her hand and sharing his strength when the pain became overwhelming. His children took turns sitting vigil, each sharing stories of their own transformations and offering comfort during the most difficult moments. Victoria told Elena about waking up in the ruins of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake, her human family dead but her vampire father offering her a new purpose. Marcus spoke about his relief at escaping the horrors of Nazi imprisonment, even if it meant leaving his human life behind forever. Isabella described the freedom she felt after her transformation, no longer constrained by the limitations placed on women in 1867 New Orleans. Gabriel's story was more recent and darker. He had been a gang member in 1970s Detroit, dying in a turf war when Alexander found him. His transformation had given him the chance to leave behind a life of violence and find meaning in protecting other supernatural beings. Sophia's transformation was the most difficult to hear about. She had been 19 when cancer began destroying her body, facing a slow and painful death when Alexander offered her immortality. Her vampire nature had not only saved her life but given her the power to help other young people in desperate situations. As Elena listened to these stories during her transformation, she began to understand the true nature of the family she was joining. Alexander didn't create vampires casually or for his own amusement. Each of his children had been facing death or worse when he offered them a new existence, and each had used their immortality to become something greater than they could have been as humans. By the second night, Elena's physical transformation was nearly complete. Her reflection had begun to fade from mirrors, her canine teeth had elongated into elegant fangs, and her skin had taken on the pale, luminous quality that marked all of Alexander's line. Most remarkably, she could feel power coursing through her veins, a supernatural strength that made her feel capable of anything. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked as Elena sat up on the altar, her transformation entering its final phase. Elena considered the question carefully. She felt fundamentally different from the woman who had entered this chamber 2 nights ago, yet she also felt more like herself than she ever had as a human. The insecurities and self-doubt that had plagued her during her marriage to David were gone, replaced by an unshakable confidence in her own worth and abilities. "I feel powerful," Elena said, surprised by the musical quality her voice had acquired. "I feel like I could do anything." Isabella laughed with delight. "That's because you can do almost anything now. Wait until Father teaches you to move faster than human eyes can follow, or to influence mortal minds with just a glance." "First," Alexander said, helping Elena stand on unsteady legs, "we need to complete the coronation ceremony. Elena is not just any new vampire. She is to be our queen, and that requires a different kind of transformation entirely." Elena looked at Alexander in confusion. "I thought the physical transformation was all that was needed." "The physical change makes you a vampire," Alexander explained. "But becoming a queen requires a different kind of magic, one that will bind you not just to me but to all the supernatural beings under our protection." Alexander led Elena to another chamber, this one even more ancient and ornate than the transformation room. At its center stood 2 thrones carved from black stone and inlaid with precious gems that seemed to glow with their own inner light. 5 crowns rested on pedestals around the thrones, each one unique and obviously crafted for its intended wearer. These belonged to the previous vampire rulers, Alexander explained. Each crown contains the accumulated power and wisdom of its wearer, passed down through generations of supernatural royalty. Elena stared at the thrones in awe. During her human life, she had sometimes fantasized about fairy tale romances, but she had never imagined anything as magnificent as what she was seeing now. The reality of becoming vampire royalty was far more impressive than any childhood fantasy. Alexander's children arranged themselves around the chamber in formal positions, their faces solemn as they prepared to witness Elena's coronation. Alexander himself had donned a crown of black metal and red gems that seemed to pulse with supernatural energy. "Elena Martinez," Alexander said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority, "do you swear to protect and guide the supernatural beings under our rule? Do you promise to use your power wisely and justly, putting the welfare of our people above your own desires?" Elena felt the gravity of the moment settle around her like a heavy cloak. This was not just a romantic gesture or an elaborate wedding ceremony. She was being offered real responsibility for thousands of supernatural lives, the chance to help shape the future of an entire hidden world. "I swear," Elena said, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me." Alexander lifted a crown from its pedestal, and Elena gasped at its beauty. Made of silver so pure it seemed to glow, the crown was set with emeralds that matched her necklace perfectly. As Alexander placed it on her head, Elena felt power surge through her body unlike anything she had experienced during her physical transformation. Suddenly, Elena could sense the presence of every vampire, werewolf, witch, and other supernatural being within hundreds of miles. She could feel their emotions, their fears, their hopes, and their devotion to Alexander as their king. The responsibility was overwhelming but also exhilarating. "Rise, Queen Elena," Alexander said formally. "Ruler of the North American vampire courts, protector of all supernatural beings under our authority, my partner in power and my eternal mate." Elena stood on trembling legs, the weight of the crown on her head serving as a physical reminder of her new responsibilities. As she looked at Alexander's children, she saw them looking at her with genuine love and respect, not because she was their father's choice but because they recognized her worthiness to rule beside him. Over the following weeks, Elena learned to navigate her new existence as vampire royalty. Alexander taught her to control her enhanced strength, to move with the supernatural grace that marked their kind, and to use the mental abilities that allowed vampires to influence human minds when necessary. More importantly, he began training her in the political complexities of supernatural society. Elena learned about the delicate balance between different vampire courts, the territorial disputes that could erupt into wars, and the constant need to maintain secrecy from the human world. "Power without wisdom is dangerous," Alexander explained during one of their lessons. "As queen, every decision you make will affect thousands of lives. You must learn to think not just about what you want, but about what our people need." Elena proved to be a quick study. Her human experience with library management and working with children had given her skills that translated surprisingly well to supernatural leadership. She had a natural ability to listen to different perspectives, mediate conflicts, and find creative solutions to complex problems. Her relationship with Alexander's children deepened as well. Victoria became like an older sister, teaching Elena about vampire fashion and social customs. Marcus helped her understand the military aspects of their rule, explaining how they maintained order among powerful beings who could be incredibly destructive if not properly managed. Isabella introduced Elena to the artistic side of vampire culture, showing her paintings, music, and literature created by supernatural beings over centuries of existence. Gabriel taught her about the darker aspects of their world, helping her understand the threats they faced from rogue vampires and supernatural criminals. Sophia, despite being the youngest of Alexander's children, became Elena's closest confidant. Her recent transformation gave her insights into the adjustment process that the older vampires had long forgotten. She helped Elena navigate the emotional challenges of leaving her human life behind and embracing her new identity as supernatural royalty. 3 months after Elena's transformation, Alexander decided it was time to present her to the other vampire courts. This would be her first official act as queen, and Elena felt nervous despite her growing confidence in her abilities. "Remember," Alexander said as they prepared to travel to the gathering, "you are not just my mate. You are a queen in your own right, with power and authority that no one can question. Carry yourself with dignity, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone intimidate you." The gathering was held in an ancient castle in the Canadian Rockies, a massive structure that had been built by vampires centuries ago and hidden from human eyes by powerful magic. Elena was amazed by the grandeur of the place, with its soaring towers, elaborate decorations, and rooms filled with supernatural beings from across North America. As Elena and Alexander entered the main hall, conversation stopped and every eye turned toward them. Elena felt the weight of their scrutiny but drew strength from Alexander's presence beside her and from the knowledge that she belonged here as much as any of them. "Lords and ladies of the courts," Alexander announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, "I present to you Queen Elena, my chosen mate and co-ruler of our realm." The response was mixed. Many vampires bowed respectfully, recognizing Alexander's authority to choose his own queen. Others seemed skeptical or even hostile, clearly disapproving of his choice to elevate a human-turned vampire to such a position of power. One vampire in particular, a beautiful woman with platinum hair and ice-blue eyes, stepped forward with obvious displeasure. Elena recognized her immediately as Celeste Moreau, the ruler of the Eastern Seaboard Court and one of Alexander's most vocal critics. "With respect, King Alexander," Celeste said, her voice dripping with false courtesy, "this seems rather sudden. Traditionally, vampire royalty is not created overnight. Your queen was human just months ago. How can she possibly understand the complexities of ruling our kind?" Elena felt anger surge through her at the dismissive tone, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was exactly the kind of challenge Alexander had warned her to expect. "Lady Celeste," Elena replied, her voice steady and authoritative, "you're quite right that I'm new to vampire society. But I bring perspectives and skills that complement King Alexander's centuries of experience. My human background allows me to understand the world we must coexist with, while my transformation has given me the power to protect our people effectively." Celeste's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words, but ruling requires more than diplomatic speech. Can you make the hard decisions? Can you order the execution of a rogue vampire who threatens our secrecy? Can you wage war against our enemies if necessary?" Elena met Celeste's gaze directly, allowing her new vampire nature to show in her eyes. "I can and will do whatever is necessary to protect the beings under our authority. My commitment to our people is absolute, and I will not allow anyone to threaten their safety or well-being." The power in Elena's voice surprised even her, but she could see its effect on the assembled vampires. Even Celeste seemed taken aback by the authority Elena projected. However, Elena continued, "I believe that true strength lies not just in our ability to destroy our enemies, but in our wisdom to avoid unnecessary conflict. As your queen, I intend to explore diplomatic solutions before resorting to violence, while always maintaining the strength to act decisively when diplomacy fails." A murmur of approval rippled through the hall. Elena had struck exactly the right balance, showing both strength and wisdom in her response to Celeste's challenge. Over the next several hours, Elena met with representatives from all 5 vampire courts under Alexander's rule. Each interaction was a test, but Elena found herself rising to meet every challenge with growing confidence. Her natural empathy and intelligence, enhanced by her vampire abilities, made her remarkably effective at understanding and addressing the concerns of different supernatural communities. The most significant moment came when a young vampire named Thomas approached Elena privately. He was clearly nervous, barely managing to control his supernatural aura in the presence of royalty. "Your Majesty," Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly, "I wanted to thank you for what you said earlier. About exploring diplomatic solutions, I mean. My maker was destroyed last year for challenging the old ways, and I've been afraid that anyone who suggested change would face the same fate." Elena felt her heart ache for the young vampire's pain and fear. "Thomas, what changes do you think our people need?" "Better integration with the modern world," Thomas said, gaining confidence as he spoke. "Many of us struggle to adapt to new technologies and social changes. We need education programs, support systems, guidance on how to maintain our secrecy while still participating in contemporary society. Elena listened intently, recognizing the wisdom in Thomas's words. This was exactly the kind of issue her human background equipped her to address. Those are excellent points, Elena said. Would you be willing to work with me to develop some proposals? I think your insights could benefit vampires throughout our realm. Thomas's face lit up with joy and surprise. You would listen to my ideas? Even though I'm not nobility? The best ideas often come from those closest to the problems, Elena replied. As your queen, I want to hear from vampires at every level of our society. Word of Elena's conversation with Thomas spread quickly through the gathering. By the end of the evening, dozens of younger vampires had approached her with suggestions, concerns, and offers to help implement positive changes in vampire society. Alexander watched Elena's interactions with obvious pride and satisfaction. She was proving herself to be exactly the kind of leader he had hoped she would become, someone who could balance strength with compassion and tradition with innovation. The gathering concluded with a formal ceremony in which each court leader pledged their loyalty to Elena as queen. Even Celeste, though clearly still skeptical, offered the traditional oath of allegiance. As Elena and Alexander prepared to leave the castle, Celeste approached them one final time. Queen Elena, she said, her tone more respectful than before, I hope you understand that my challenges tonight were not personal. I needed to be certain that you could handle the pressures of royalty. I understand completely, Elena replied graciously. I would have been disappointed if the court leaders hadn't tested my readiness to lead. Your challenges helped me demonstrate my commitment to our people. Celeste nodded approvingly. You may have been human recently, but you're learning to think like a true vampire queen. Perhaps King Alexander chose more wisely than I initially believed. On the journey back to their castle in British Columbia, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. Less than a year ago, she had been a discarded wife, considered worthless because of her inability to bear children. Now she was an immortal queen, ruling over thousands of supernatural beings and planning innovations that would benefit vampire society for centuries to come. You were magnificent tonight, Alexander said, pulling Elena close as their private jet soared through the night sky. I've never been more proud of anyone in my entire existence. Elena smiled, feeling the truth of her transformation settle around her like a comfortable cloak. She had found her true calling, her real family, and her authentic self in the most unexpected circumstances. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we rule together, Alexander replied. We build the future we want for our people, we protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we love each other for eternity. Elena looked out at the star-filled sky, thinking about David Richardson and wondering if he had any idea how spectacularly wrong he had been about her worth. His rejection had been the catalyst that led her to her real destiny, the push she needed to discover her true power and purpose. In rejecting Elena for her supposed failure as a wife, David had unknowingly freed her to become something far greater than he could ever comprehend. She was no longer the broken woman who had been discarded for her infertility. She was Queen Elena, ruler of the North American vampire courts, mother to 5 extraordinary supernatural beings, and eternal partner to the most powerful vampire king in existence. As their plane descended toward the castle that would be Elena's home for the rest of her immortal existence, she felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every moment of despair had been necessary to prepare her for the incredible destiny that awaited her. Elena's story was no longer about what she couldn't do or provide. It was about what she could accomplish with unlimited time, supernatural power, and the love of a family who valued her for exactly who she was. The woman who had been banished for her infertility had risen to become the most powerful female vampire in North America, a queen who would spend eternity protecting and nurturing the supernatural beings under her care. In the end, David Richardson's cruel rejection had been the greatest gift he could have given her. By casting Elena aside, he had set her free to discover her true worth and claim her rightful place as vampire royalty. She would spend forever grateful for his betrayal, because without it, she never would have found her real family, her true love, and her authentic self. The castle appeared in the distance, its towers reaching toward the stars like a promise of endless possibilities. Elena was finally home, not just in a physical sense but in every way that mattered. She had found her purpose, her power, and her place in the world. The rest of her immortal existence stretched before her like an unwritten book, filled with adventures she couldn't yet imagine but ready to embrace with all the strength and wisdom of a true vampire queen. Queen Elena's reign had begun, and it would be remembered throughout supernatural history as the dawn of a new age for vampire society. The woman who had once been considered broken and worthless had become the most powerful force for positive change in the vampire world, proving that sometimes the greatest triumphs rise from the ashes of the deepest defeats.